grab your popcorn and snacks, find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey, welcome to the show tonight. We've got a great show lined up for you. My name is Charlotte, and I'm going to be your host for the evening, for the next hour or so anyway, probably an hour. Welcome. We are the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team at www.californiahaunts.org. You can find all the radio shows and everything going back for the last year at www.californiahauntsradio.com. I want to welcome everybody. I'm excited. Dang McDonald's anyway. I'm giving McDonald's a plug tonight. The Happy Meals. Have you guys looked at the Happy Meal toys? It's like 50 years of Walt Disney World. So it's 50 characters that they're stuffing in these things. And somebody I know got an R2-D2 that was really cool. So of course the quest was on. But once I got my first one, because I'm not supposed to eat that kind of food, bad for my health. It's like a $2.95 heart attack, right, or whatever they cost. And I ended up getting a Daisy Duck, and then I started to think, and I thought, these are about the same size as Christmas ornaments. And I remember years ago I had ordered from Franklin Mint or Bradford Exchange the Disney ornaments, and they were really pricey. And over the years, they've kind of gotten broken or lost or whatever. So I finally, this time I got it in my head that I want to have, these things for Disney ornaments. So all my friends are out going to McDonald's to buy Happy Meals for me now because I really want these things. So here's the word out. If any of you guys are listening to this show and you happen to get a Happy Meal, send the toy my way, because I'm just going to use a glue gun and get some string, and I'm just going to hang them up and put them on my tree. So that's the goal, is to make them into Christmas ornaments. Anyway, welcome to the show. Our guest tonight has a nice story to tell. She was molested as a child, Sandra Cooze, and that's what she does. She helps people with trauma, that have gone through trauma like that, or other types of trauma too. I mean, that's not the only kind of trauma, but that's what she does. And so she's going to be talking with us tonight to tell us about what she does, and maybe talk about a couple of her cases, without mentioning names, of course. But she does wonderful work with people, and that's why I wanted to have her on the show, because being a newspaper reporter like I was for years, in beats that I covered, I did come in contact with a lot of people that had come from trauma situations, and some of them ended up in jail, because they had that. I mean, there was one particular case that when I was first there, of a wife that killed her husband because he constantly was beating her up and doing other stuff to her, and it finally got to be too much, and she pulled the trigger. So, I mean, this is what happens when this stuff can build up in people, and I've seen it with kids and juvenile cases and whatnot, and different things that I've seen over the years. So I'm really excited to have Sandra on. So let me bring Sandra on for you guys, and we can talk to her. Hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you?
Good. If you have any Happy Meal toys, let me let me know.
I think here in Canada we get other ones than you get in the
There
States.
you go. There you go. It's a quest, It's like you start getting one, you're like, hey, these are cool. I've been to like 4 different. I'm not supposed to eat that stuff. There's 4 different McDonald's in my area, and the whole last week I went to 4 different McDonald's to get 4 different toys. Right now I'm starting the circuit again. Tell me about yourself, ma'am.
Well, where should I start? Originally from Germany, love brought me to Canada, and now I've been here for 17 years and counting. I'm an intuitive trauma release and self-empowerment coach, certified traumatic incident reduction facilitator, and published author, among other things. I think those are the 3 major ones.
Well, let's talk about the trauma that you went through. I mean, what led you up to doing this, to becoming a trauma coach?
Well, if you had told me, let's say 10 years ago, that I would become a trauma coach and write a book about trauma healing, I would have laughed. It really was not something I expected to happen, but I guess you grow in those things. Well, my story is started when I was 12. I was molested. Then at 14, I was sexually harassed. From the age of 16 to 17, I was bullied in school. Between the age of 19 and 25, I was sexually assaulted multiple times. At the age of 22, I was raped. And when I went to see a psychologist after I was raped and I just knew that I needed help, after the first session, he dismissed me with the words that he believed that I had already worked through it all, what he was supposed to do.
Hmm.
And that was the point where I hit rock bottom. Now, the thing with rock bottom is you can either stay down there and find a way to cope, or you pull yourself back up. At that point, I hadn't realized that what I was doing was pulling myself back up. But the more I continued on my healing journey, the more I realized that I was healing. The more aha moments I had, the more I understood trauma, and the easier it became to let it go. And so I guess I became so passionate about trauma healing because from my own journey, I really understood trauma and I understood what we have to do to heal. That I just said, I want to help others because people have to know that it's really not this hard.
Hmm.
People need to know how they can heal and live happy lives.
In your case, was it a family member that molested you?
No,
Okay.
no, it wasn't. Luckily, it
Yeah.
was the stable master where I took care of a pony.
Mm. And then you were raped, like you said.
Yes,
That
that was a
happened too.
friend. That was basically my then boyfriend's best friend.
Mm. So it seems like, I mean, obviously, the first thing somebody would say, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, somebody looking at it would say, well, you brought it on yourself because you had, this happened repeatedly to you. But I mean, that's not how it works, obviously.
Well, I can tell you, I didn't say here, pick me every time. Really not. I mean, when I was raped, I was wearing a baggy t-shirt and sweatpants. The most unsexy thing on the planet. And it didn't matter.
Hmm. Hmm.
So really, I mean, I get that we really have to get over this stigma that women just asked for it.
Right.
But to be honest, if men were raised right, this wouldn't happen. Because
Right.
usually we're not even asked. We're never asked when this happens. So it was not like we
Right.
were asking for it because no one asked us.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you were bullied. Did that have something? I mean, did that have something to do with what had happened to you, or was it something where like with you, by then, after going through that trauma, you probably didn't feel like a person, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the bullying, I have no idea how it started or why it
Okay.
started. And it wasn't just one or two kids, it was almost two full classes, like my class and the neighboring class for over a year.
Mm,
And I don't know, maybe I just liked learning too much and they didn't like that. I don't know. It's usually the nerdy, the smart kids, I guess, that get bullied
sure.
because the others are just jealous or upset about something. But I never thought I was pretty. I never thought I was very smart or anything. Just, I don't know. To this day, I don't know why they started the bullying,
Okay. All right.
but I made it through.
You did. You look good. You
Thank
sound
you.
good. You
Thank
sound
you.
good. So what happens when somebody comes, hires you, or you take somebody on to help them with their trauma?
Well, people who I would say find me, who feel
Mm-hmm.
drawn to my work, they're ready to heal. When we know we need healing and we go and see a psychologist and say, okay, he's going to help me through this. Well, it only works if you really want it. You have to want to heal because ultimately you're the one who's doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
No doctor, psychologist, therapist, or facilitator on the planet can help you if you don't want it because healing is an inside job. So, and those people that find me, they're usually fed up. They say they they know that there's so much more to life, but they're held back by their past, and they just want it gone. They're so sick of it. So they're no longer the victims. They move past this. They're just survivors, and they just say, "I don't want it anymore. It's driving me crazy." And those people, they move through the trauma healing process so fast because they really want it.
Are there people that hide it? That when they're coming to you, can you tell if somebody isn't telling the whole story?
Yeah, most definitely. Because you just know. I mean, one trauma survivor will always know another one.
Okay.
So yeah, I know when they're hiding something.
Because
But
to
I will
me,
not just tell them. I will
right,
be gentle, helping them to open up.
right.
But yeah, I know.
Because to me, it would be, I don't know, the people that I've met, that I've interviewed in the past as a newspaper reporter, they've always been embarrassed about having been abused.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's understandable. I mean, for the longest time I was too, but I was raised with the belief you don't talk about it. What would the neighbors think? So it was not about what happened to me, but it was about what would other people say about what happened. So, inadvertently, without realizing it, my family made me feel bad about what happened to me. So it was never about me, it was always about the others.
Mm-hmm.
And most people are raised like this. Luckily, this is changing now because people are more aware. I know my son will never be embarrassed of anything that should happen. Hope not, but I'll make sure he will never be embarrassed about it. But yeah, this is usually how it is. I mean, this is something we have to overcome, that this is something that happened to us and we have every right to tell the story. And talking about it is so empowering. The first time we hear ourselves talk about it.
I guess that's because, like you say, that people will hold this in. They'll hold the abuse in. They won't say anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're right. There's generations of people that were taught not to say anything. People that come in from, say, the 30s through the 50s that are even in a marriage situation where they're taught that you have to obey your husband no matter what,
Right.
and they're not going to say anything.
Exactly. But
And
this is
with
all
kids,
conditioning.
yeah,
This is trauma in itself,
yeah.
which can be healed.
So how do you go about healing that? You get them to start talking to you, and then how's that work?
Well, usually we have like a 30-minute chat, which I of course offer for free. So we just talk to each other, get to know one another. They can feel out if they feel comfortable with me, because it's so important that a person feels comfortable with the person they want to heal that trauma with, because trauma is something so personal.
Mm-hmm.
You have to feel comfortable with the person you want to work with. So, and then we just talk about what happened. And then as we talk, we will talk about what is the best approach for them. Some go with traumatic incident reduction, which is an amazing modality for trauma, trigger, and PTSD release. And it's been around since the 80s, and I absolutely love this modality. I always say that it's the most amazing trauma healing modality no one has ever heard about, because literally no one has. But it's very fast, but it's very gentle. So you could release one traumatic issue within 5 to 6 sessions, compared to years and years in therapy. Or if their trauma is not as deep anymore, then we use coaching. So it really depends on where they are on their journey. I basically meet them where they're at and grow with them. So we're at basically the same level. And then I just help them along the way until they don't need me anymore.
Do you think it helps when or do you tell them that you had something happen to you, to
Yes.
kind of break the ice with them?
Yes. It's very helpful to people, because then they see that I actually know. Especially when it comes to sexual assault and rape and bullying, I know how it feels. I've been there. I've done it. Well, haven't done it. I had experienced it.
Right.
But I also know how incredible it feels to be free of it. So I know both sides. So not only do I tell them, yes, I know, but they can see that there's hope because I'm on the other side of it. So yeah, it definitely helps a lot.
Once they start talking to you, can you tell that it's very releasing for them? Do they end up going, faster? Or I'm not going to say faster and faster, but they're opening up more and more, once they get to that point, right?
Right. Yes, it is really beautiful to see that. I mean, when we do work through TIR, it's a very specific process where they're like gradually releasing trigger after trigger. And you can really see the shift happening when this aha moment comes, when they realize something, and then just a big chunk of the trauma just falls off and they breathe easier and they start taking better care of themselves, for example. Like they come back to themselves. Like I'm working with a woman and she has been through so much in her life. And all of a sudden she calls me and just says, I want to go to the hairdresser. I want to get my nails done. I never wanted this. And things like that, they make me so happy because they shifted. And we didn't have that many sessions. This is so beautiful to see how they're changing.
This is all interesting to me. When you talk about triggers, what do you mean by triggers?
Well, trigger. So there's many different kinds of triggers. A trigger is an emotional response brought on by something you saw, you heard, someone said or did that basically triggers an emotional memory from the past. So let's say you have an argument with your partner and all of a sudden he or she says something and you're just blind rage. From 0 to 100, you're being triggered, but not by your spouse or partner, but by something that reminded you of a traumatic or upsetting event from the past. But in this moment, we don't realize that because we're so overwhelmed from the emotions. And so that's a trigger. But once we understand triggers, we can release them. It's very easy. I mean, I still have the odd trigger come up every once in a while. We all do. We always have triggers come up, but they get less and less and less because the most severe ones we already dealt with. But when I'm being triggered, I can tell. And so I can shift out of my emotion like immediately because I know that situation right there is not the reason why I'm being triggered. So, and then I look at the trigger and unravel it and bring understanding to it. And with that, I can release it, which is also something I teach my clients to do it themselves.
Okay. When you talk about, when people hear about abuse, the first thing they think about is sexual abuse. But there's also a lot of other types of trauma. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, really, anything that makes us think less of ourselves or dims our light is trauma. Even if we're a little child and our parent was busy for a second, we were so excited, wanted to show them a picture and say, well, I can't right now, can we do this later? And we feel upset in this moment. It's just something small, but if you continue to be dismissed, for example, for little things, that emotion builds up and builds up and builds up. And before we know it, we're adults and think we're not worthy of anything from that little dismissal because our parent was busy, for example. Then there's other traumas like a car accident, or we see something happen that doesn't happen to us, but to someone else. All this causes trauma. Now, abuse comes in many different forms. It can be physical abuse. It can be mental abuse. We can abuse ourselves without knowing it because we keep telling ourselves the worst things. I mean, our ego can really be mean. So, yeah, abuse comes in so many forms. Anything that dims our light is abuse because it doesn't help us thrive. And whatever doesn't help us thrive, in essence, is abuse. Big or small.
I was thinking about the military. I'm surprised you don't hear a lot more stories of people that have signed up to go in the military, and then they end up getting out because they're so traumatized because the drill sergeants and stuff. Because I mean, talk about mental abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Yep.
though I'm not cutting the military. I'm just saying,
Yep. Well, I don't want to assume why
Yeah.
people don't talk about it. I mean, we can all assume why they do that. But yes, there's a lot of trauma in the military,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of PTSD, which also can be healed.
Mm-hmm.
We can completely recover from PTSD, completely release it, because in essence, PTSD is a very intense trigger that catapults us back to the moment we were traumatized. But even that we can release,
Mm-hmm.
which is amazing.
That is amazing because the stuff that they see that we've never seen, that
Yeah,
they go through is incredible.
exactly.
What do you think? Like with somebody that's been, let's say, like let's talk about abuse. I mean, like between a husband and wife, that verbal abuse. How deep does that go to somebody? I mean, when somebody's just pounded by somebody else, I mean, what kind of scars does that leave?
Well, it really depends on a story, because if someone has an abusive spouse, usually they already had abuse growing up.
Okay.
It's just like this cycle that keeps on reappearing. And so we're already preconditioned to trauma. And the constant abuse of, let's say, a narcissistic spouse is you're getting numb at first,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like constantly. So you just completely shut out, zone out, so you don't hear that, and you just take it all on. And it's extremely difficult when the partner is abusive one day and the kindest person the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is really, this flip-flopping back and forth is really breaking down all your defenses, so you don't even know what's up or down. At the end, you think you're the problem because your spouse makes you believe that gradually, and then you always look for the fault in yourself. And this is one of the reasons why so many abused partners cannot leave their relationship, because they're always being sucked back in. And it's so difficult to really find the strength and the courage to say, no, this is enough, I'm going.
So, is it like you were saying? Cause I've been thinking about that while you were talking before too. Is a person that's been abused, like you say, the cycle continues? Is that because that's the only way they know how to function?
Yes and no. This is different levels. Well,
Mm-hmm.
on a spiritual level, we're already preconditioned to it, because we're on the energetic level, we're looking for a person who resonates with our energy on the same level. And if we're an abuse victim, then we're on a lower level. And then person with that same energetic level is coming into our lives, and they're usually the abuser. Not
Okay.
always, luckily, but a lot of times.
Okay.
Then there's a lot of people who have this need to help others. They look to nurture people, and narcissists love to be nurtured. They love that we really pamper them into oblivion
Mm-hmm.
and really dote on them. So those are like, they find each other a lot of times. And yeah, it's it's a vicious cycle. But once you break free, you can heal. And once you heal, you start attracting different people, because you're not in that traumatized mindset anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, in the case of people that, like the ones I was talking about in the intro to the show, the people that are pushed too far, when they end up killing a spouse or something, is that it gets far because they don't go seek help? Well, what are the reasons they don't go seek help? Are they afraid, or like you say, are they just stuck in that to where they're just so so inclined to live in that lifestyle?
Well, most people who are in those relationships, they don't realize that they're being abused.
Okay.
For them, it's normal because it's gradually been getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, you can suppress only so much. At some point, you just snap because it was one time too many. It's like
Okay.
they're called crimes of passion, I believe.
Right. Right.
The brain takes out and you go into defense mode. I mean, yeah, you're basically protecting yourself.
Right.
And this is just being pushed too far.
Understood. Understood. Can you tell me? I mean, you told me about this case this client you're working with now. Can you tell me about a couple others? A couple of others. You don't have to mention names or anything.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I have a couple in my book, so I
Okay.
will talk about those. Yes.
Sure.
Well, I have had a client, and she was also sexually abused. It was her father, and she was bullied in school, and she was raped by her first boyfriend. And so we really worked through all the steps. And the worst issue that she had to release was when she was pregnant and her then narcissistic boyfriend forced her into an abortion and to type her tubes at early 20. And she was actually considering keeping the child, but he made her so scared, saying that if you keep the child, I'm going to kill you both. And then on the way to the clinic, he was completely flip-flopping, saying, "You're going to kill my child," like really guilt tripping her. So abusing her left and right the whole time. She didn't even know what was up, what was down. She was constantly abused from the morning until the night. And she did have an abortion that day, and she did get her tubes tied. And this was the worst trauma she had to release. And she did it so fast. It was incredible. Now it's just a story to her. It doesn't faze her anymore. Just really amazing.
Wow.
And the same with the other traumas she went through. It's really what's really holding us hostage is us, because we're not allowing ourselves to let it go. Because as angry as we are at other people, we're the ones who are angry. They probably don't even care about us anymore because it's been so long ago, but we're holding on to it. So once we allow ourselves to let it go and really move through and past it, it's just gone. I mean, the memory will always be there, but what's gone is the emotion that kept us stuck.
Okay. Okay.
And that's really a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. So, what possessed you to write the book?
Well, that book was a journey in itself. It was supposed to be about spiritual development, journey to yourself, because the journey back to yourself is a spiritual journey, understanding who you truly are. But the more I wrote, the more chapters of trauma emerged. And so I thought, well, I can't put trauma healing and the whole spiritual journey into one book. I have like a 1,000-page book here. And so Journey to Yourself is a trilogy, with How to Heal from Trauma being the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So it really emerged as I was writing. That's really how the book came to be. It was a process, just like every other journey. The more I wrote about trauma, the more ideas popped into my head what else I can write about, because I wanted to create a book that not only talks about trauma, but really demystifies it, really goes into the depth of it and explain what's really happening when we're being traumatized, what happens in the body, in the mind, with the emotions, why we behave in certain ways, how we can work on ourselves to release it. So really it's, not your normal book about trauma healing.
Okay.
It's got exercises, room for notes, and challenging questions, just all to help you on your journey. And this really was like my little passion project, because I'm a person, I love to explain to people how things really work so that they can really understand it and do it themselves. I don't want to just say, okay, come on, work with me. Of course I do, but I also want the readers to be able to walk the journey by themselves if this is what they want to do, because most people don't even know where to start.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to accomplish with my book, saying this is what it is, this is how it works, this is what you can do. There you go.
How long did it take you to write it?
Well, when you think about, I also had to get over my limiting beliefs of why am I why am I the one to write this book? About a couple of years.
Okay.
With breaks in between, and yeah. I guess the first book always takes a little longer.
Sure. But it's a labor of love too.
It is. I loved every minute of it.
You sound like a really great person considering what you've been through.
Thank you. Well, I healed. And I have nothing holding me back. I love what I do. I love life.
What do you think? Because like you say, when you went to talk, when you finally went to somebody to talk to you, and he said, "Well, you're already there. You're healed." Mm-hmm. What do you think you did to heal yourself? I mean, obviously it was a struggle. It must have been a struggle to get to that point.
Yes, it was. Well, it's when you hit rock bottom, then you start to think outside the box. Because just like everybody else, I believed counseling or therapy is the only way to help me heal, because that's what everybody tells you.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, okay, therapy failed me. He just dismissed me and decided I had healed, when I knew I hadn't. But who am I to question a psychologist? Because you're not supposed to question those who are educated.
Right.
Well, and I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? I can either stay down here. Luckily, I was never drawn to drugs or alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I was very lucky. But I also didn't like where I was. And so I just took one step at a time. And at some point, I started to realize that I was actually healing. But by then, I already had healed quite a bit. So looking back, there was one moment that was a huge aha moment for me. It was when my last ex-boyfriend, before my husband, broke up with me. He said that he had already been through a relationship with a woman who had mental problems, and he didn't need another one. Now, he didn't say this mean. It was matter-of-factly.
Sure.
But this made me think. And this really made me look at myself and what I was doing in relationships. And as I was starting to observe myself, I noticed how I was sabotaging every relationship I was in. At first, it was nice. It was wonderful. And then it's like I flipped the switch. And I kept on calling all the time. And I just wanted to see them all the time. And I started doubting the relationship, the whole spiel.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, I don't like who I am in relationships. I was really honest with myself. I said, I don't like who I am in relationships. And I decided that I'm not going to have another relationship until I like the person I am. And that was a really big aha moment for me. And that taught me that in order to really heal my trauma, I have to look within.
Mm-hmm.
Really go deep and look at myself, really question myself. And what am I doing? Why am I feeling like this? And then unravel. And that was really the key moment where I understood, okay, this is what I need to do. I have to look at myself really critically and not be afraid of what I'm going to see. And I just continued on doing this, and it got easier and easier, and I got deeper and deeper. And it just started all to make sense. Really. So it's not rocket science or anything that I wanted. It was just something that happened over time, and here I am.
Sometimes it helps, when you have gone through something on your own.
Yeah.
Because then when you talk to somebody else who's struggling and maybe kind of apprehensive about talking to somebody like you know, to get that trauma that trauma worked on, it makes it a lot easier because you were able
Yeah.
to do it on your own.
Exactly. There's always like two components that I believe are very important when you try to work with someone who has been through trauma. That A, you understand trauma, and B, you have healed yourself. I've had clients come to me who said, I triggered my therapist. I had to calm my therapist down. And this is something that should not happen. And it wasn't just one client, it was several from all over the world who said that. Because a lot of therapists, counselors, psychologists, they go into trauma healing because they've been through trauma themselves and want to help others. Yes, but if you don't heal your own past, how can you help someone else heal? This is not everybody. I'm not saying everybody. I'm just saying there are a few. So they do have great intentions, but if I went to a psychologist and I triggered him with my or her with my story, I would feel like if my story is too intense for my therapist, how am I supposed to overcome it? And then those people usually don't go back to the therapist and just feel miserable because they feel their story is too hard to handle. And this is so important that someone who helps others through trauma sure has healed their own so that they don't get triggered. I mean, I have heard the most unbelievable stories. They're horrible, but I don't get triggered.
That's great.
And that's really important for a therapist or
right. That's really great. When you were talking about healing the trauma, how do people heal from that? How does that work? Is it through talking to you? Is it process they have to go through? You know, a spiritual thing, or how does that work?
Well, it's different for everybody.
Okay.
It depends where they are, but really it's all about understanding the story and moving past it, in essence. Now, with traumatic incident reduction, the modality is structured. It's always 3 steps and they're always the same after the initial session, of course. So you have the exploration where you talk about a person, a place, or a situation. You just talk about it. Then the next 3, maybe 4 sessions is called unblocking, where we have specific questions that we ask repeatedly until the answer is nothing else comes up. And this is a very interesting process simply because it allows the client to really look at their trauma or that situation, person, place we're looking at from different angles and gradually release one trigger after another. Because the thing is, when we have a trigger that's right on the surface and we release that, the next trigger that was right underneath comes up and is be released then. So this is like a beautiful process where there's so many aha moments, or the client says, wow, I didn't even remember that. This is so weird. I totally forgot about this. So this is how the triggers gradually come to the surface. And when we both feel that the client is ready, we go into the actual TIR session where the client talks about the traumatic incident repeatedly. Like sometimes I have 20, 30 repetitions of the same story. But this allows the client to really release the last trigger of that incident. And once this is done, for most, the trauma has no meaning anymore. It's just like I would say, I have wooden floors. Same thing. And it's an amazing modality. It's so fast. And yeah, now with coaching, it's a little different because with coaching, we don't have to go so deep because most of the work has already been done. It's more about making sense of things, like having aha moments, shifting out of their mindset, releasing limiting beliefs. So trauma is very multifaceted. simply because there's no one-size-fits-all approach, and everybody reacts differently to trauma. For many who come to me for coaching, it's more like the self-sabotage, the limiting beliefs, the self-doubt, the little voices in their head. So we unravel where this is coming from through coaching. And then as soon as they realize where it's coming from, it's gone. Of course, they have to challenge themselves a little bit. So I give them homework. Let's say if they're fear of speaking up. So then they will have to put themselves in situations where they have to speak up and really challenge themselves and see that it's actually an amazing feeling when you hear yourself talk for the first time. Things like that. So it's really different from person to person, which is why I love being so versatile in how I work.
Are they timid when they come in to talk to you? Or are they at that point, the point that they're coming in to see you, they're ready to talk?
Well, it depends. Most of them are, but mostly because we already had like a conversation before. So they don't come to me as a stranger. We usually have a talk over Zoom or over the phone, or they heard from me from a friend. So before we start with the actual sessions, I already helped them to ease into it, which is very important, because when you're stressed, when you're nervous, not a good start. So, but yeah, usually they're a little nervous, but it's okay.
What do you think is the best part about what you do?
For me, seeing that spark in their eyes when they have their first big realization and start to release. This moment, it's the best gift. That first sigh of relief, that smile, you can literally hear this rock that's falling. That, I think, is the best thing. Seeing them transform and get a new life, get their life back. That for me is the most amazing thing.
Now, after you've spent a day listening to everybody's stories, how do you unwind to get that off, to release that? Because I know, listening to that stuff, I'm not cutting anybody to ribbons, don't take it wrong, but listening to that stuff over and over can really, get to you after a while.
Well, if it gets too intense, a salt foot bath and Hallmark Christmas movies. That always does it.
Hey, and Danica McKellar has the first one this year too. Yeah,
nice.
I saw that last night. She's got the lead one on the first Friday.
Can't wait.
What you do is so wonderful with people.
Thank you.
Because there's so many people that suffer from trauma. And like you say, it doesn't have to be abuse. It could be different types of trauma that somebody's gone through in their life. It could be, like you say, my mother. I never realized with my mother that some trauma that she must have had at one time, because she was very jumpy in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times when she would be as a passenger, she would just, do this in the car. So something somewhere along the line happened with her that I wasn't aware of.
So is she generally very controlling?
No.
Or likes to be in control or perfectionist?
No.
No?
No.
Then something must have happened in the car.
Something somewhere along the line.
Yeah, where
something I wasn't aware of. My sister probably knows. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it always struck me growing up, because I remember seeing that. Or even when I was driving, she would do this in the car. And I'd laugh and go, okay. Or she'd grab a hold of something, hold on in the car.
Yeah.
It was always that.
Trigger.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's what I'm trying to say here is that it's just not abuse, being beat up. It's not sexual abuse. It's other stuff, and it could be small stuff that got to somebody. Maybe you're at the park on 4th of July and a firecracker goes off too close to you, or to where you're at or something, and it's a trigger. Just like that would be like PTSD, to go through.
Yep, exactly. Most people think that abuse is just the big stuff,
right?
Or trauma is just the big stuff,
but
it's not. It's the little things that we don't even realize as trauma, but as long as it keeps coming up, we're traumatized, because if we didn't care about it, why is it keep coming up? Like friends in school, they say something and we didn't like it, but it was like, was like, yeah, 2 years later, why do you still think about it?
Right.
Because you're still being triggered by it. So you're being traumatized. It may not seem like trauma, but it is, because you're still focusing on that, and it still makes you feel bad.
Or maybe you're out with a parent, and you're like maybe 5 or 6 years old, and the parent gets into an argument with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's an argument going back and forth, and you're in the public place. I mean, that's traumatizing for a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be the heavy duty stuff. Do you get to talk to many children, or is that not in your part of what you do?
No, but I
Okay.
do talk to parents
Yeah.
who would
Okay.
like to have help with children.
Sure.
That's what I do.
Sure. Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
basically from mom to mom.
Right.
So, because I believe that when children have trauma, the best people to help them through is the parents. But of course, they need some ideas on how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, if I talk to parents or through the parents to the child, directly with children, no.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's go that way. When a parent comes into you to talk about a kid that's having issues, what type of advice would you give them, or what would you tell them?
Well, it would
I know it
depend
depends
on
on the
the issue.
case.
So I would first we would talk about what's going on. If they know why the child is behaving like this. For a child, the most important thing is honest communication. Really, it depends how old the child is, but if a child is very young, articulating their emotions is very difficult because they're still growing into their emotions. They're
Mm-hmm.
just acting out and they have no idea why they feel so angry, for example. So it's about finding a way to talk to the child that the child can understand. So I always tell parents that go on the level of your child and talk to the child as a child. Just like when I was bullied, I was 16 years old. And I went to my grandma and I told her about it. And she was like, "I just ignore them. They're going to stop." Well, of course they didn't. I mean, as an adult, this is what you would tell another adult. Just ignore them. But kids are not adults. So when you know your child's being bullied in school, try and put yourself into how your child is actually feeling. If you've been bullied in school, go back to that time and remember how you felt and what you wished someone would have done or said, and then talk to your child. So this is very important that we go back to the level of the child and not look at it from the adult's perspective, because we've been through this. We know the child doesn't know, but we have to go back to the child's level so that they can understand. Okay, so this is why they are doing that. Empower them with knowledge. Why do other kids bully us? Because they're jealous of something. They want to feel strong. I don't know, we're loners, so we're the best target. And there's so many reasons, but helping kids understand that bullies are sad or upset too, and they just find their strength in hurting others.
Mm-hmm.
To help a kid understand that in their own language can make all the difference.
You think like some of these TV shows you see where child bullies grow up to be adult bullies. Do you think there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff like that? I mean, why is that? I mean, why is it that they never get that? I just had a V8 kind of thing going on and come out of that.
Well, for the most part, bullies are created. So then we also have to look at how was it at school, at home? How did the parents behave? Was the father a bully, the mother? Did they just not pay attention to the child? Was he always dismissed, not taken seriously, not being nurtured as should as a child?
Mm-hmm.
Or was he abused? And just masking the abuse by being controlling and bullying because they found that this works and it makes them feel in control. Because when we're being traumatized, what we have to understand is the first thing we lose is our sense of being in control. It's like we have our sense of control being taken away from us. That's why we have so many perfectionists or people with OCD, because they want to try and compensate for loss of control. So whatever they can't control makes them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a hole there. The trauma is still there. So we're never happy with the control we're trying to create as a perfectionist or control freak. And this just gets worse and worse and worse because we cannot connect the dots.
Okay.
And so, and if a child was abused at home and turned into a bully because of it, and this is the only way they felt in control was by controlling others, or they learned it from home, then yeah, they become bully adults. Or
Makes
worse.
sense. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Now, you do other work besides this trauma work, right?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I'm also a Reiki master. So I teach and practice Reiki. Before I founded Rise Above Your Story, I had another business called Serafina Faye where I offered handmade jewelry. Now, the more I went into trauma healing, the
Mm-hmm.
more I shifted out from the other business and at some point closed it because it was tax-wise, it was too much work, honestly. There are two businesses. So I still have the jewelry on my website, but not really as a main point, more like because I love creating jewelry. And yeah, so I do a lot of spiritual work. I work through Akashic Records. I do ancestral trauma healing. So the trauma that we get passed on through generations, which is
Okay.
also a very interesting subject that I love.
Absolutely.
And yeah, because there's a lot of things that we hold on to that isn't even ours. But we still have the limiting beliefs, the self-sabotaging behavior because it was passed on through the generations to us. And releasing that is just like releasing trauma. It can hold us back without us even realizing it.
Is that where generational curses kick in? When people talk about a generational curse?
Well, I can tell you about a generational curse that I released with a client
Okay.
that was created 500 years ago. No, more, 700, 1500s. Yes. It was a client came to me and she said she believes that there's a curse on the family. That was it. And she said, well, she has three sisters and two sisters. They have three sisters together. One is narcissistic. The other one stays out of everything. And she was kicked out of the family. And she said the same as with her mother and her two sisters. One was a narcissist, one was kicked out of family, and one just stayed quiet and was anxious all the time. So, and when we see those patterns, we think it's learned behavior, but it's not. It's trauma that's been passed down for generations. So when we look in the past, I use the Akashic Records to go further back. Now, the Akashic Records are like a library where from every soul that ever lived on a planet, like all the lives and all the lives they're going to live. So all the information you can find in there, just like a little bit of info is. And so I use that to go into the past lives. So I look into the ancestral line, and in the 1500s was where this family curse was created by three sisters.
Huh.
And the story was that they were living in a village. They were all in marrying age and were hoping for a husband. And a man came into town who was looking for a bride. And he fell in love with all those three sisters. And he decided he would marry the strongest one. So he started to court all of them, but didn't tell one another, and just so they were like talking amongst each other and were bickering and fighting over this guy because they all wanted him. And so one got completely anxious and traumatized by all this. One got kicked out of the family. One became a narcissist, and the narcissist was the strongest one, and that's who he married. Now, this sounds like a freaking romance novel, I know, but that's what happened. And ever since then, whenever there were three sisters born this family line, that happened with the issue with those three sisters. because it was never released. The three sisters never reconciled. And so the trauma was passed on through generations until now, where we can move into releasing it.
Interesting. I got a question in the chat room. Is how far back can you go in the Akashic Records?
I haven't found the limit yet, to be honest. I think it depends on many lifetimes we were on Earth.
Okay.
Really.
That makes sense too.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, because I know people, that think they might have generational curses on them.
Oh, we all do. That's the thing we all do. I have released so many from myself: contracts, curses, and trauma. And yes, it's truly fascinating, really.
It is
and
fascinating.
How much your life can change when you release stuff that wasn't even yourself. We don't even realize that, how it is affecting us. I mean, before I started doing this work, of course, I healed my own ancestral trauma, and I still have stuff come up every once in a while. But it's more fascinating than terrifying, really.
Were you able? Because a lot of people that do that kind of work can't work on themselves. This is why I find this fascinating that you can do that. Because a lot of people say, "Oh no, I can't work on myself. It has to be somebody else."
Well, they're right, because you have to take a step back from doing this. Just like I don't read my own tarot cards.
Okay.
Because I want the outcome so bad, so I try to fabricate what I want to see. So I know that, so I have other people to read my tarot cards. Yes, or when I use my pendulum outside the Akashic Records.
Right.
And I don't ask questions for myself, because I know that I have to take a mental distance to really just look at it like for any other client and not let my emotions guide me. Yes, it can be tricky, so you really have to be strong to do this, like the emotional strength to take a step back and not being overwhelmed by it. But with the Akashic Records, it's because it's not me, it's my ancestors. So in the way I use it, I ask specific questions that I can't get emotionally involved in. It's impossible. So it's really how you ask the questions, really. And yeah, it's truly interesting what came up over the years.
Fascinating. You know what? This hour has blown by. I've learned so much from you about trauma, and now the Akashic Records. I would love to have you on just to talk about your work with the Akashic Records.
I would love to. I can give
great.
you yeah,
I'll be emailing you after the show.
Right on air if you like.
I'll be emailing. Sure, that would be great. In fact, I got openings in November, so I will email you after the show. And we'll figure something out, okay?
Sounds great.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And I appreciate it. And I hope your book does well. And I hope you do well.
Thanks so much.
Like I said, we're going to get her back on because we want to talk about the other stuff she does too.
Okay.
She's multi-talented. All right. Well, you have a good evening. Oh, how can people find you?
Okay. Well, people can find me on my website, Rise Above Your Story. I have both the trauma healing and the ancestral healing on it.
Okay.
And people can just send me a message through there. I'm on Facebook, Sandra the Trauma Whisperer. I'm on LinkedIn, Sandra Cooze. Instagram, yes, but I'm hardly ever on there, so please don't message me because I won't see it until months later. Just a warning. So I guess Facebook is the best bet, or contact me through my website, and looking forward to hearing from you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, and I will be emailing tonight to set up a day in November. Oh my God, that sounds great. Okay. All right, thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, I learned so much, and I hope you guys did too. I really do. Tomorrow we're going to be on at noon because we're going to be taking a trip to Ireland. Well, not really, but our guest is in Ireland, Mariel Ford Clark, who's going to be talking about what happens to our loved ones after they die, and do they cross over, or what happens during that death process. So she's going to be joining us tomorrow, and it should be a pretty good show. what I will do for people that come in later, the usual time for the people that are working, I will post a replay of the show on Facebook for you guys, and of course, you guys can always go to YouTube. On that note, thank you. You guys, our numbers are rising, like I always tell you. You see that ticker at the bottom? This is all self-supported. I pay for all this. I pay for all the equipment that we have, everything, and we want to keep these shows on the air. And I'm being very honest about that. With everybody else, money's tight, so that's we're trying to keep these shows on the air. If you guys could find it in your heart to donate at PayPal.me at California Haunts, I promise you, it all goes into this show. Every last dime of that goes into this show. So I really appreciate it. YouTube is an issue. YouTube is a problem because we need over 100 subscribers in order to have a dedicated URL. Right now, we don't have that. And if you could, find it in your heart to go over YouTube, but the problem with that is that because there's no dedicated URL, you cannot find us. You cannot find us at all. I don't care how you do it, because I've tried. I've tried it from my cell phone. I've tried it from my computer. Not going to happen. The best way to do that is to go to our radio site at www.californiahauntsradio.com and click on the video that's on the front page. That'll take you over to our YouTube site. Then you can subscribe from there. Because as soon as we hit that 100 or more mark, we're going to get our URL, and then I can send you directly over there to YouTube. Also, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you didn't like the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here. But again, I want to thank you all for coming. And I'm going to show you one more time. Let me get on here. I'm going to show you Sandra's information one more time and where you can get her book. And here this is. And it's website riseaboveyourstory.com. And the book you can get at Amazon. And the book is called Journey to Yourself. So again, thank you guys for coming. And I will see you tomorrow at noon.